Hi there, I welcome you to my presentation about the high-low method. Now, we need first understand the concept of costly behaviors. Many factors affect the level of costs incurred. For instance, inflation will cause costs to increase over a period of time. However, in the field of cost accounting, when we talk about cost behavior, here we are referring to the way in which costs of output are affected by the fluctuations in the level of activity. An understanding of cost behavior patterns is essential for many management tasks, particularly in the areas of planning, decision making, and control. It would be impossible for managers to forecast and control costs without at least a basic knowledge of the way in which costs behave in relation to the level of activity. In this video, we are going to look at one of the methods which we can use to split what we call the semi-variable costs or the mixed costs. This method is known as the high-low method. Remember, mixed costs are those costs that include both a fixed and a variable component. So we are going to see how do we split these costs into their fixed and variable elements using the high-low method. The high-low method, of course, analyzes semi-variable costs into their fixed and variable elements. But how do we use this method? We always select the period with the highest activity level and the period with the lowest activity level. The first step is to compute the variable cost per unit. For you to compute the variable cost per unit, you need to get the total cost at the highest activity level minus the total cost at the lowest activity level over the units at the highest activity level minus the units at the lowest activity level. In other words, we get the change in costs, that is at the highest activity level and the lowest activity level, divide by the change in units. Those are the units at the highest activity level minus the units at the lowest activity level. Now, after computing the variable cost per unit, you have to compute the fixed costs. How do we compute the fixed costs? You can use any of the two levels, either the highest activity level or the lowest activity level. To compute fixed costs, you simply get the total cost less the total variable costs. But remember, to compute the total variable costs, we get the units at any of the activity levels times the variable costs per unit. So we get the fixed costs by deducting the variable costs, the total variable costs from the total cost at any activity level. Remember, by their nature, fixed costs are assumed to be constant at all levels of activity. But of course, it's not a must that fixed costs will be constant at all levels of activity. They will only be constant within a certain activity range. If you want to predict costs for any activity level, you simply get fixed costs plus your total variable costs. Remember, to compute total variable costs, we get the variable cost per unit times the activity level. I'll use this illustration to show you how we can predict costs using the high-low method, and then how we can split the mixed costs using the high-low method. Illustration 1. We have the activity in units as well as the total cost. We have July, we have August. Now here we only have data for 2 months, but of course you'll find in examination question papers that you'll be given different months where you have to select the month with the highest activity level and the month with the lowest activity level. However, in this case, we only have July and August, meaning that one month is having the highest activity level, then the other month is having the lowest activity level. So we have this data. What is the total cost of 3,000 units? Let's see how to compute this. So July, we have 4,360 units. Total cost is 26,810. Then August, we have 6,400 units. Total cost is 31,400. So this is our highest activity level. This is our highest activity level. Then this is the lowest activity level. Now, since we have the highest activity level and the lowest activity level, we have to compute the variable. We have to compute the variable cost per unit. Variable cost per unit. How do we compute the variable cost per unit? We need to get the change in total costs over the change in the units. So we get 31,400 minus 26,810 divided by the change in units, 6,400 minus 4,360. So your variable cost per unit, 31,400 minus 26,810. This gives us 4,590 over the change in output, 6,400 minus 4,360. This is 20,40. So your variable cost per unit, we are using dollars. Your variable cost per unit equals to $2.25 per unit. But of course, I have to compute the fixed cost because these are mixed costs. These total costs are mixed. They have elements of variable costs as well as elements of fixed costs. So let's compute the fixed costs. Now your fixed cost will equal to the total cost minus the total variable costs. We can use the highest activity level. Fixed costs are the highest activity level. We have to get the total cost, which is 31,400 minus the total variable cost. And I told you that to get the total variable cost, you get the variable cost per unit, which is 2.25 times the units at the highest activity level, which we have as 6,400 units. Therefore, our fixed costs equals to 31,400 minus the total variable costs, which we have as 14,400 at this activity level. So our fixed costs, we have $17,000, meaning that out of the 31,400 total cost in August, 17,000 is fixed, and of course 14,400 is your variable costs. Therefore, the total cost model is represented by what? By your total cost equaling to fixed costs, which we have as 17,000 plus the variable cost per unit, which is $2.25x, where x is the activity in units. So what is the total cost of 3,000 units? So total cost of 3,000 units equals to the fixed costs, which is 17,000, sorry. Fixed costs we have 17,000 plus the total variable costs at 3,000 units, which we can compute by getting the variable cost per unit of 225 times our x, which are the units of 3,000 units. So this is 17,000 plus 6,600, which gives us $23,600. So you see, we can use the high-low method to split costs into, to split mixed cost into their variable and fixed cost elements. And you can still use this same method to predict costs as we have seen. So in this case, we can predict costs, and the costs of 3,000 units, we have $23,600. That is how we use the high-low method. Of course, it has advantages as well as some disadvantages. It's easy to use, and of course, it's easy to understand, but it also has some problems. First of all, it relies on historical cost data, so the predictions of future costs may not be reliable. Then still, it assumes that the activity level is the only factor affecting costs. That assumption is not correct. There may be some other factors that affect costs other than activity. It uses only two values to predict costs. Only uses two values to predict costs. Those are the values at the highest and the lowest activity level. But this may not be representative of costs at all levels of activity. Then bulk discount may be available at large quantities. Of course, now the variable cost per unit cannot be the same at all levels of output, as we assume that the variable cost per unit is always constant at all levels of activity. So that is the high-low method. Thank you for watching. I remain Senior Hannington. Bye.